There is a hidden law that governs not only the outer universe, but the inner one, the law of psychic balance. Just as gravity pulls everything toward equilibrium in the physical world, the psyche pulls toward wholeness in the spiritual realm. Every lie, every act of cruelty, every distortion of truth sends a ripple through that unseen field, and the psyche, the soul, demands compensation. It does not forget. It does not forgive automatically. It restores. When a narcissist violates another person's soul, they are not simply breaking moral codes. They are disturbing a sacred equilibrium. To the human eye, it might look like they got away with it. They charm, manipulate, and deceive, leaving others bleeding while they walk away smiling. But the inner world is not fooled. The unconscious, like an ancient scale, begins to tip, balancing the offense by creating pressure on the offender's own soul. What they projected outward will soon turn inward. The law of psychic balance does not strike instantly. It unfolds quietly through time and consequence. A narcissist's punishment begins the moment they believe they are untouchable. That belief is their blindness. Every time they exalt themselves at the expense of another, the psyche records it. Every moment of false superiority, every denial of guilt, every manipulation that robs another of peace, these are debts written in the ledger of the soul. And the debt must be paid. At first, it manifests as discomfort, subtle anxiety, a creeping sense that something is wrong. They begin to lose sleep, not because of conscience, but because of imbalance. The psyche whispers, but they do not listen. So it speaks louder, opportunities begin to falter, relationships start to collapse. Their charm, once effortless, now feels forced. People see through them. What was once easy becomes strained. The outer world begins to mirror their inner decay. This is not coincidence. This is compensation. The unconscious seeks balance, and when the ego refuses to humble itself, the external world becomes the mirror of the internal wound. The narcissist loses what they took from others: peace, love, admiration, security, not as a punishment from above, but as a restoration of universal order. To manipulate others is to create a distortion in the field of truth, and every distortion demands correction. The more they lie, the more their reality fractures. The more they control, the more chaos invades their own life. The law of psychic balance does not need witnesses. It does not require human judgment. It operates in silence, ensuring that no harm done to another's soul can remain unreturned. The narcissist's greatest illusion is that they are in control. They believe they can shape reality through will and deceit. But the psyche is older than will, deeper than ego, and infinitely more powerful than deceit. It does not serve the liar. It serves truth. And so the liar eventually finds themselves living inside the very illusions they created. A self-made prison of paranoia, emptiness, and fear. When they hurt others, they fragment themselves. Each betrayal slices away a piece of their own humanity. Each manipulation divides their psyche further. They feed on admiration because at the deepest level, they are hollow. But the more they consume, the less satisfied they become. The balance shifts further, and the psychic debt grows heavier. Eventually, that inner imbalance spills over into their outer life. They attract the same cruelty they once inflicted. They meet others who mirror their deception. They become victims of their own methods. People often ask, why doesn't God stop them? The truth is, He does through the natural laws of the psyche. The universe doesn't need lightning bolts or loud vengeance. The punishment is inherent in the act. To live against truth is to live against life itself. When someone harms another's soul, they step out of alignment with divine order, and once misaligned, everything begins to fall apart. The narcissist's downfall is not sudden, it's progressive. It begins within. Their grandiosity starts to crumble. The applause fades. The people they used start to leave. Their health, their mind, their peace, all deteriorate as the psyche reclaims what was taken. They start to feel what they once denied: shame, loneliness, fear. But now it comes multiplied. It comes as a flood they cannot control. This is the justice of the inner world. Not revenge, but restoration. The same energy they used to wound others returns to them, seeking to correct the imbalance. And yet, even in this collapse, they rarely awaken. Instead of surrendering, they fight harder, deepening their suffering, for the law of psychic balance does not rest until awareness is born. The pain continues until the lesson is learned. The one who caused harm becomes haunted by what they refuse to feel. The memories they repressed come back in dreams, in failures, in faces of people who remind them of their victims. They are surrounded by their own shadow, the very part of themselves they projected onto others. And there is no escape, because the psyche does not allow fragmentation forever. It calls everything home, every wound, every act, every truth. The narcissist believed they could wound and walk away, but the psyche follows, it waits. It restores. It will strip away every illusion until the debt is paid, until balance is restored, until the soul remembers what it tried to forget. There is a kind of sickness that disguises itself as power, a swelling of the ego so vast it eclipses the truth of who one really is. This is the inflation of the false self. It begins subtly as a defense against pain, shame, or insignificance. The narcissist cannot bear to see their own smallness, their own fear, their own wounds. So they create an image, perfect, superior, untouchable, and they feed it until it becomes their entire identity. They no longer live as a person, but as a performance, enslaved by the illusion they built to escape themselves. The false self is not born from confidence, it is born from terror. Deep inside the narcissist lies a fracture, an early wound that told them they were not enough. To survive that unbearable truth, they construct a mask. But this mask is not a simple disguise. It becomes their reality. Every compliment, every conquest, every manipulation adds air to the balloon of illusion. The more inflated it becomes, the further it drifts from authenticity. The false self grows while the real self withers in the shadows. In this inflation, they begin to believe they are beyond consequence. The narcissist sees themselves not as part of humanity, but above it. They think rules, morality, and empathy apply to others, never to them. The inflation blinds them. They mistake admiration for love, fear for respect, control for connection. The ego whispers that they are chosen, exceptional, destined for dominance. But the higher the illusion rises, the more fragile it becomes. Inflation always precedes collapse. The psyche, like the universe, cannot sustain imbalance forever. The narcissist, bloated by their own self-image, begins to lose touch with reality. They confuse fantasy for truth, arrogance for wisdom, manipulation for mastery. Their perception warps. They start to believe their lies. And in that belief, they drift farther from their soul, from the part of themselves capable of love, humility, and reflection. The false self is not merely a mask worn to deceive others. It is a fortress built to protect the narcissist from their own inner emptiness. Inside that fortress, no real emotion survives. Genuine joy, empathy, and remorse are replaced with artificial versions. Rehearsed smiles, strategic apologies, performative love. They imitate humanity, but do not feel it. Everything becomes a tool, a weapon, a mirror, reflecting only what feeds the illusion. Yet beneath the grandiosity, something fragile trembles. The narcissist's true self, exiled, silent, and starving, waits in the shadows. The greater the inflation, the deeper the repression. And the deeper the repression, the greater the fear of being exposed. They live in constant dread of being unmasked. Every challenge to their superiority feels like annihilation. Criticism becomes a mortal wound. They rage, manipulate, and destroy, not because they are powerful, but because they are terrified of collapse. The punishment of inflation is isolation. The narcissist's world becomes smaller as their ego grows larger. People drift away, not because they see through the illusion immediately, but because the false self cannot sustain intimacy. True connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is death to the narcissist. They crave admiration but reject closeness. They seek followers, not friends. They demand loyalty but give none. And when their relationships inevitably disintegrate, they tell themselves they were betrayed, never realizing it was their own ego that consumed the bond. In the beginning, their confidence is magnetic. The inflated self shines brightly. It promises strength, certainty, and control. But over time, the light becomes harsh, the charm becomes arrogance, the leadership becomes tyranny. People stop admiring and start avoiding. The narcissist, sensing the loss of supply, inflates further, becoming even more performative, more extreme, more desperate for validation. But no amount of admiration can fill the emptiness inside. The false self is a vessel with a hole at the bottom. The more they pour in, the more they lose. The universe has its way of correcting illusions. When the ego expands too far, reality begins to press back. Failures multiply. Secrets unravel. The applause fades. What was once a towering image of perfection starts to crack. The mask slips in moments of crisis, revealing the terrified child underneath, the one they've spent their entire life hiding. The fall is not accidental, it is inevitable. The psyche can no longer support the lie. In that collapse, everything they identified with begins to crumble: status, power, relationships, even sanity. The false self, once inflated like a god, begins to deflate under the weight of truth. The narcissist cannot comprehend it. They think the world has turned against them. But it is not the world. It is the self-demanding balance. The soul, long silenced, begins to speak through chaos, forcing the narcissist to face the emptiness they've denied. Every lie they told to survive becomes a chain around their mind. Every manipulation turns into a ghost that haunts them. The persona that once gave them control now consumes them. The inflation that once made them feel divine becomes the very force that drives them into despair. The false self, unable to sustain its own delusion, begins to implode, leaving behind nothing but fragments of what could have been a whole human being. The tragedy of the narcissist is not that they wanted too much power, but that they wanted to escape their own powerlessness. They built a false self to protect themselves from pain, but in doing so, they exiled their truth. They traded authenticity for illusion, connection for control, love for domination, until the only thing left was the echo of their own grandiosity reverberating through an empty soul. Everything we send into the world eventually returns to us. This is the essence of the mirror principle, a law woven into the fabric of both the soul and the cosmos. It is not a punishment, but a reflection. Whatever energy, intention, or emotion one projects outward is eventually mirrored back through life itself. For the narcissist, this principle becomes the silent architect of downfall. What they inflict upon others, the deceit, the humiliation, the manipulation, inevitably finds its way home. The world becomes their mirror, showing them the very face they tried to hide. The narcissist spends a lifetime building reflections, not relationships. Every person they encounter is treated as a surface upon which they can see their superiority, their control, their false perfection. They don't relate to others as souls, but as mirrors reflecting the desired image. When those mirrors reflect something different, truth, rejection, independence, the narcissist feels shattered. They rage, punish, discard, and move on to the next reflection, never realizing the true mirror is not external, but within. The mirror principle ensures that what one refuses to acknowledge in oneself will appear outside. The narcissist denies their envy, their emptiness, their shame, and so they project it. They call others insecure to hide their own insecurity. They accuse others of being selfish to mask their own greed. They condemn others for lying while living a life of deceit. Every accusation they hurl outward is a confession in disguise. The world becomes a theater of projection, and they are both the playwright and the blind actor. But the psyche does not allow such blindness forever. What is disowned must return, and it returns with precision. The people they once mocked begin to mirror back their cruelty. The same tactics they used to control others are used against them. They attract those who treat them as they once treated others. They fall victim to their own games, unable to see that the mirror has turned. The universe speaks through repetition, and until they see the pattern, the reflection keeps returning, sharper each time. The narcissist believes they can manipulate reality. They think that by bending perception, they can control truth. But the mirror principle reveals that perception is not creation, it is reflection. No matter how well they perform, the truth of their energy always reveals itself through consequence. Every false narrative they spin eventually collapses under the weight of reality. The lies return not as stories, but as experiences. They live through what they once made others live through. The pain they denied becomes their teacher, their reflection, their only remaining truth. The mirror doesn't judge, it simply reveals. When the narcissist looks into the mirror of life, it shows them their own emptiness, their own distortion. But instead of seeing themselves, they blame the reflection. They destroy the mirrors, relationships, careers, families, believing the problem lies in others. But each destruction only multiplies the reflections. The same wounds appear in new faces, new situations, new failures. The mirror becomes unavoidable. The punishment is subtle at first. The narcissist starts to feel misunderstood, rejected, unappreciated, exactly what they once made others feel. They experience abandonment, betrayal, and loss. The very emotions they once exploited become their own reality. And the more they resist, the harsher the mirror becomes. The universe magnifies what they deny until it can no longer be ignored. The same charm that once captivated others now repels. The same manipulation that once worked now backfires. The mirror has turned fully, and there is nowhere left to hide. They begin to see their own face in the eyes of those they hurt. Every victim becomes a reflection of their own inner damage. Every broken relationship becomes a reflection of their inability to love. Every failure becomes a reflection of their spiritual emptiness. The narcissist starts to live surrounded by symbols. People and situations echoing their inner state. It is not fate being cruel. It is the psyche demanding awareness. Until they face their reflection, the cycle continues endlessly. For the narcissist, the most terrifying experience is not exposure, but recognition. The moment they see their own darkness reflected back is the moment their illusion begins to die. They have built their entire identity on the denial of weakness, and now the mirror shows them nothing but weakness. The grand image fractures. The God they believe themselves to be dissolves into the fragile, fearful self they abandoned long ago. The reflection they run from is the only truth that can free them, yet it feels like death to face it. The mirror principle does not discriminate. It applies to every soul. It is both teacher and revealer. What we give is what we meet. What we project becomes what we attract. The narcissist world is filled with chaos, not because they are cursed, but because their inner chaos is simply being shown to them. Their cruelty returns as isolation. Their arrogance returns as humiliation. Their lies return as exposure. Every external downfall mirrors an internal one. Every loss a reflection of something long lost within. The mirror never lies. It only waits for recognition. The narcissist's suffering is not the work of vengeance, but of truth making itself visible. Life holds up the mirror again and again, offering the same lesson through different faces, hoping one day they will finally see themselves not as they wish to be, but as they are. What is buried never dies. It only hides, waiting for the right moment to resurface. This is the eternal movement known as the return of the repressed. The principle that every feeling, truth, and memory pushed out of awareness eventually demands recognition. The unconscious is not a grave, it is a living realm, and what we exile there grows in the dark, feeding on denial until it breaks through the surface of consciousness. For the narcissist, this law is their undoing. Everything they refuse to face, guilt, shame, fear, loneliness, gathers beneath their carefully constructed image, building pressure until their own mind begins to revolt against them. The narcissist lives through repression. Their entire personality is built upon the refusal to feel. Pain is weakness, the empathy is vulnerability, remorse is defeat. They repress their early wounds, the moments of humiliation, neglect, and rejection that once made them feel small. In place of those buried emotions, they construct a false identity, one of superiority, control, and perfection. But repression does not erase what was felt, it only conceals it. The emotions they hide remain alive, pulsing in the unconscious, shaping their behaviors in ways they cannot comprehend. To repress guilt is to invite projection. The narcissist cannot bear to see their own cruelty, so they accuse others of being cruel. They cannot tolerate their own envy, so they sabotage those they admire. They cannot admit their own weakness, so they attack vulnerability in others. Every act of manipulation is an attempt to silence the inner voice that reminds them of what they are running from. Yet the more they deny it, the louder it becomes. The psyche is not an obedient servant, it is a mirror of truth. It will not allow repression to last forever. At first, the repression feels successful. They rise in power, admired by many, feared by others. They seem untouchable, as if the past has been erased. But time begins to reveal the cracks. Their reactions become exaggerated, their emotions unpredictable. They rage over minor criticism, collapse under the slightest loss of control, and oscillate between arrogance and despair. What is happening beneath the surface is not mystery, it is eruption. The repressed material, long silenced, begins to force its way upward. It demands to be seen, to be integrated, to be healed. But the narcissist cannot integrate what they refuse to admit exists. So the unconscious takes another route. It manifests through suffering. The guilt they denied transforms into anxiety. The shame they buried becomes paranoia. The vulnerability they suppressed appears as uncontrollable anger. The very emotions they rejected now control them from the shadows. Life begins to reflect the chaos within. Relationships deteriorate, their image falters, their health declines. The unconscious no longer whispers, it screams. The return of the repressed is merciless because it is honest. What we deny within ourselves becomes our external fate. The narcissist's external collapse mirrors the internal implosion of what has been long ignored. The false self, the grand persona they use to mask emptiness, cannot withstand the force of what's returning. Every lie they've told to themselves becomes unbearable. Every illusion they built begins to dissolve. They feel hunted by invisible forces, never realizing the hunter is their own shadow. They begin to dream of being chased, of falling, of losing everything. The unconscious speaks in symbols, but the message is clear. Face what you've buried, or it will consume you. Yet, instead of surrendering, they double down on denial. They create new lies to cover the old ones, new distractions to silence the pain. But repression has a limit. When that limit is reached, it explodes, sometimes through breakdowns, addictions, isolation, or despair. Sometimes through the very destruction of everything they use to sustain the illusion. The narcissist's punishment is that they cannot escape themselves. The more they run, the more the repressed follows. It appears in every failure, every broken relationship, every sleepless night. The guilt they refuse to acknowledge becomes an invisible weight pressing on their chest. The shame they buried beneath arrogance begins to surface as self-loathing. The rage they projected onto others begins to turn inward. They become their own victim, trapped in a war between the self they show and the truth they hide. The return of the repressed is not vengeance, it is balance. The unconscious seeks wholeness, and wholeness requires that nothing remains buried. Every memory, every emotion, every shadow must be faced. The narcissist believes they can rewrite their story by controlling perception, but the unconscious is not fooled by words or appearances. It deals in truth. What was denied as pain must return as experience. What was avoided as emotion must return as consequence. Slowly, their world begins to mirror the inner split. Their charm becomes emptiness. Their confidence becomes delusion. Their victories turn hollow. The external collapse is simply the inner world demanding recognition. The narcissist becomes haunted not by ghosts, but by their own forgotten feelings. They see in others the things they despise most about themselves. They try to destroy those reflections, but in doing so, they destroy every connection that could have saved them. The very emotions they once buried now rise as their own destroyers. In the end, the repressed always returns, for nothing in the psyche is ever truly lost. The narcissist's downfall is not the result of external punishment, but the inevitable eruption of what they have long refused to face. The shadow demands acknowledgement. The truth demands entry. And until the narcissist turns toward what they've buried, the unconscious will continue to rise, tearing apart every illusion, every defense, every mask, until nothing remains hidden in the dark. There exists a law beyond human understanding, quiet, invisible, and absolute. The sacred protection of the innocent. It is not written in any book, yet it governs the deepest movements of the soul and the unseen order of the universe. Those who walk with pure intention, who love sincerely, who forgive when wounded, carry within them a divine shield that no malice can permanently penetrate. Their suffering may be deep, but it is never wasted. The forces that move through truth guard them, even in silence, even when it appears that darkness has won. When the narcissist targets such a soul, they believe they have found easy prey. The innocent appear soft, trusting, open, unaware of deceit. To the manipulator, they seem defenseless. But what the narcissist cannot see is that innocence is not weakness, it is alignment. It carries within it the strength of the divine order itself. To harm the innocent is to provoke a power far greater than human will. The narcissist's arrogance blinds them to this. They think they can exploit purity without consequence, forgetting that what they are violating is sacred ground. Innocence does not fight with rage or revenge. It responds with endurance, with clarity, with an unshakable connection to truth. The narcissist mistakes this calm for passivity, not realizing that the quiet heart is being held by something eternal. The innocent may cry, but every tear is witnessed. Every act of cruelty leaves an imprint, not on the victim, but on the soul of the perpetrator. And the universe, ever precise, begins to correct the imbalance in ways unseen. At first, the narcissist believes they have won. They see the innocent retreat into silence and mistake it for defeat. They watch them break and assume the damage is complete. But the sacred always rebuilds itself. The wounded soul becomes wiser, deeper, stronger. The pain that was meant to destroy becomes the fire that refines. Meanwhile, the one who caused the harm begins to lose touch with the light. Slowly, imperceptibly, their blessings start to vanish. Doors close, energy drains, peace disappears. The protection that once surrounded them, the grace they took for granted, withdraws. The narcissist's punishment begins not with thunder, but with absence. The absence of peace, of meaning, of connection. They begin to live inside the consequences of their actions, surrounded by the echoes of their own cruelty. The more they try to regain control, the more the universe resists. What once came easily now turns to dust. What once obeyed their manipulation now slips through their fingers. The sacred protection of the innocent ensures that harm never leaves its origin untouched. Innocence, even when wounded, holds power that cannot be corrupted. The heart that loves in truth becomes a vessel for divine justice. It does not seek retribution. It simply trusts that balance will come, and it always does. The narcissist, having violated that trust, begins to face a reality that mirrors their own intent. Their lies return as exposure, their arrogance as humiliation, their cruelty as isolation. They cannot understand why everything begins to crumble, why the same charm that once worked now fails, why the world seems to turn cold. But what they are experiencing is not misfortune, it is restoration. The universe defends purity by allowing corruption to destroy itself. The narcissist is undone by their own choices. Their downfall is not orchestrated by vengeance, but by divine order correcting imbalance. The more they resist accountability, the faster they unravel. The energy they once stole from others now turns heavy, suffocating. They find themselves surrounded by emptiness, the very emptiness they once projected onto others. This is the unseen justice that follows those who harm what is pure. The innocent, on the other hand, begins to rise in silence. Their strength returns not through force, but through grace. What was taken from them is restored in new form. Deeper wisdom, stronger intuition, clearer boundaries. They begin to see through illusions. They no longer crave validation or explanation. They simply walk in alignment, and alignment is protection. The same light that once made them a target now becomes their shield. The narcissist cannot approach without being burned by their own reflection. The sacred protection of the innocent operates beyond time. It may seem delayed, but it is never denied. The universe measures balance not by revenge, but by truth. When the innocent are harmed, truth begins its quiet work of correction. The narcissist's victories turn hollow, their joy turns fleeting, their influence fades. Every act of deceit becomes a thread that unravels their own fabric. What was meant to elevate them becomes the source of their downfall. They fall not because the innocent retaliated, but because divine law requires that purity cannot remain violated. The more the narcissist tries to maintain control, the more they expose their own weakness. Their charm becomes transparent, their confidence turns brittle. They are haunted by the memory of the one they tried to destroy, because that memory is tied to the truth they cannot erase. Every time they see light in another, they are reminded of what they lost, the grace that once surrounded them before they defied it. They become wanderers in a world that no longer responds to their will, cut off from the protection that innocence naturally carries. And so the balance unfolds quietly, inevitably. The innocent, once broken, rises in alignment with divine law. The narcissist, once exalted, descends beneath the weight of their own corruption. The sacred protection of the innocent is not a myth. It is the invisible hand of truth restoring harmony to what arrogance tried to destroy